Hi friends, after the recent terrorist attack, most of the Indians wanted to teach our neighbor Pakistan a lesson. But the other question that everybody asked was what will happen if China opens a second front? Well, in these conditions, India can tackle both China and Pakistan together. So we have prepared a video on why India and China fought in 1962 so that we can analyze what led to the Indo-Sino War of 1962. The first and the foremost reason was an outcome of the British politics in Southeastern Asia. British defeated the Sikh in 1946, resulted in transfer of sovereignty over Ladakh to the British. Boundaries discussions was held between Britain and China, but the matter of Aksai Chin area was kept undefined as Aksai Chin is a flat land at 500 meters above sea level, and before the Italian campaign of World War II, British never knew the benefit of being situated at such heights in warfare. In 1865, Johnson Line was drawn, which places Aksai Chin area in Kashmir. This was not accepted by the Chinese, but the British government used this as a reference point. In 1899, McCartney-MacDonald Line was drawn, which puts parts of Aksai Chin in China. But in 1911, the Xinhao Revolution resulted in collapse of the Central Powers in China, and by the end of World War I, the British officially used the Johnson Line as a border of reference. However, they took no step to establish outposts or to assert control on the ground, as the land was practically useless being situated at such altitude. In the map we have given here, you can see Johnson Line that is in deep blue, also McCartney-MacDonald Line that is given in dotted blue line. After independence, India used Johnson Line as its reference point. On 1st July 1954, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru wrote a memo directing the maps of India be revised to show definite boundaries on all fronts. Up to this point, the boundary, especially the Aksai Chin sector, has been described as undemarcated. But now, after this memo, Jawaharlal Nehru wants all the boundaries to be definite boundaries. During 1950s, the People's Republic of China built a road connecting Xinjiang and Western Tibet, of which 179-kilometer road ran south of the Johnson Line through the Askai Chin region claimed by India. Askai Chin was especially accessible to Chinese but was more difficult for the Indians on the other side of the Karakoram to reach. The Indians did not learn of the existence of the road until 1957, when it was confirmed when the roads were shown in the Chinese maps published in 1958. The discontent and mistrust can be seen from the actions of both the countries. While the Indian position as stated by Prime Minister Nehru was that Askai Chin was part of Ladakh region of India for centuries, and that this is the northern border was a firm and definite one which was not open to discussion with anybody. The Chinese position was Minister Zhao Enlai argued that the western borders have never been delimited, that the McCartney-MacDonald line which left the Askai Chin within Chinese border was the only line ever proposed to the Chinese government, and that the Askai Chin was already under Chinese jurisdiction. In 1826, British India shared a common border with China after Britain acquired control of Manipur and Assam from the Burmese after the First Anglo-Burmese War of 1824. In 1913, British, Chinese and Tibetans attended a conference in Shimla regarding the border dispute. Whilst all three representatives attended the meeting for the agreement, Beijing later objected to the proposed boundary between the region of Outer Tibet and Inner Tibet and did not ratify it. The details of Indo-Tibetan boundaries was not revealed to China at the time. The Foreign Secretary of British Indian government, Henry McMahon, decided to bypass the Chinese and settle the border dispute bilaterally by negotiating directly with Tibet. In 1950, the Chinese People Liberation Army annexed Tibet, and later the Chinese extended their influence by building a road in 1956. and placing border posts in Aksai Chin region. India found out about the road when the road was completed, protested against these moves and decided to look for diplomatic solutions to ensure stable Sino-India border. In 1954, China and India negotiated the five principles of peaceful coexistence that contains mutual respect for each other's territory, integrity, sovereignty, mutual non-aggression, mutual non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality and cooperation for mutual benefit, peaceful coexistence. This apparent progress in relations suffered a major setback when in 1959 Nehru accommodated a Tibetan religious leader at the time, the 14th Dalai Lama, who fled Lhasa after a failed Tibetan uprising against the Chinese rule. In pursuance of Nehru's forward policy, India started sending Indian troops in border patrols into disputed land. This program created both skirmishes and deteriorating relations between India and China. The aim of the policy was to create outposts behind the advancing Chinese troops to counter or cut off their supplies, posting them north of the disputed line. There were eventually 60 such outposts, including 43 of the McMahon Line, to which India claimed sovereignty. China viewed this as further confirmation of India's expansion plan directed towards Tibet. India followed a policy known as the probing action policy against the Chinese, in which we moved mountain troops forward to cut off Chinese supply lines to do two things: to test Chinese resolve and intention regarding India, and test whether India would enjoy Soviet backing in the event of Sino-India War. In 1962, Indian forces established an outpost in Dhola on the southern slope of Thagla Ridge. Dhola lay north of McMahon Line but south of the ridge, along which the Indian interpreted the McMahon Line to run. In August, China issued diplomatic protest and began occupying positions at the top of Thagla. On 8 September, a 60-strong PLA unit descended to the south side of the ridge and occupied the position that dominated one of the Indian posts at Dhola. Fire was not exchanged, but Nehru said it to the media that Indian army had the instructions to free our territory, and the troops had been given directions to use force. On 11 September, it was decided that all forward posts and patrols were given permissions to fire on any armed Chinese who enter Indian territory. Now the big question: will China indulge in a full conventional warfare with India, given that India and Pakistan enter into war? I think no. Why? China exports to India worth around 60,413 million USD. Its total trade with India amounts to 72,347 million USD. India is the biggest consumer base in the world. No country in the world is in a position to go into war with India if they are concerned about their economic development. Pakistan will be excluded in long run. So what will happen if China attacks India? I think Japan will get alerted immediately. China has to face a response from Japan as soon as an attack will start. China has to divide its forces between India and Japan. Like Japan, Vietnam will be on alert and they can launch an offensive against China. They have a long-standing rivalry with China. If North Korea starts a new front to support China, South Korea will launch an attack in retaliation. America, that has a mutual defense agreement with South Korea, launch its 7th fleet, and the 7th fleet will move into action. Russia is not friends with China. There is a bitter relationship between the two. But according to the mutual defense agreement, an attack on India is an attack on Russia. Thus, a full-scale world war starts. Thank you.